We're in a golden age of comic book accurate superhero costumes on film. Blue Beetle is spot on to the Jaime Reyes iteration of the character. My Adventures with Superman gave us the little red trunks on the outside, and I don't know about you guys, but I feel like a little part of my soul was healed seeing Hugh Jackman in a nearly comic book accurate Wolverine suit. The knuckle holes, the red X on the belt, the hair, the mutton chops, all of it looks like it was ripped directly from the 2004 Astonishing X-Men run, just, with sleeves this time, which is totally understandable. We've been teased for wanting an accurate Wolverine suit for years, and we just got that little nod to the cowl in a deleted scene in the Wolverine. But ultimately, it seems like we'd get that suit over his dead body. Get it? Because in Logan, never mind. Yet, a lot of the times, they're similar enough, just very desaturated. Over the years, we've been treated to a good number of accurate costumes. Psylocke in X-Men Apocalypse, Spider-Man usually always nails it, and Deadpool has always been there, so just, perfect.
I know, right?
Or it's a very brief, blink and you'll miss it cameo like in Thor Love and Thunder, Luke Cage, or Hawkeye. Or when they do it accurately, it's always for a joke like in WandaVision. Even if Wanda's Sokovian fortune teller Halloween costume was campy, fans will probably remember it more vividly than, say, her red trench coat phase. For a good number of people, they first got into these characters when they wore that vibrant and functionally awkward costume. When it's done right, fans notice these little moments because they tell us that the filmmakers are paying attention to the source material. The superhero suit is iconic to each individual character, and it tells the reader everything you need to know about them. Sure, they will have their regular everyday attire, but the focus is always on the supersuit. Before the character is even drawn on the first page, the artist thinks about how to best tell as much information about the character without saying a single word. How can their personality best be expressed in how they dressed? And how? You give them a distinctive silhouette so you can spot exactly who it is without any other details. For the most part, a lot of comic book films have gotten this idea well enough. A huge part of, say, the Hulk would just feel missing if he wasn't as massive or if his pants weren't slightly ripped. And of course, they get new designs all the time, just like how they do in the comics, because you gotta get all that sweet, sweet cash from the new merchandise with the new costume. But they need to stay consistent enough throughout each franchise, which brings us to the next crucial part of character design, the color palette. Just a very quick rundown on color theory as it relates to superheroes. A certain color always invokes a particular emotional feeling with a piece of art. Like Picasso's blue period. There isn't a hard and fast rule with what each color means, and can sometimes be contradictory. It all depends on the intended message of the artist. Red can be bloody and vengeful, but it can be determination and love. Blue can be sadness, but it can also be calm like a beautiful day. Yellow can be cowardice, but it can also be happy or energetic. And that's the very specific reason why we always see those same colors pop up for the good guys. They're the three primary colors on a color wheel. When all three are together like we see with Superman, Wonder Woman, Thor, Captain Marvel, and for the sake of argument, let's add an Optimus Prime and Sailor Moon. These are the most powerful heroes of that particular universe. Red and blue are used for the heroes that are just under that for strength, but are still very important, like Spider-Man, Captain America, or Doctor Strange. Red and yellow are your more light-hearted heroes that are a bit more of a show-off. Think Iron Man, Human Torch, and The Flash. Yellow and blue convey trust and confidence, like we see with X-Men, Luke Cage, Nova, or Batman sometimes. The same goes with the villains, who are almost always in secondary colors, orange, green, and purple. Green can also be used for heroes that are more grounded, like Green Arrow, or close to nature, like Swamp Thing, and purple for Black Panther because it shows his royalty. Because all art is subjective, and the context behind each color choice is the actual intention. In the comics, there was also something very important that kept the superheroes as bright and vibrant as they were back when they were created. It was the cheapest option. Printing millions of copies of a single issue was very expensive, and when comics only sold for 5 cents each, well, you gotta cut as many corners as possible. Enter the 4-color process. You use the cheapest pulp paper possible, and the quickest rundown I can give. Each page is then rolled through the press 4 different times, one getting all the dots for cyan, one for yellow, one for magenta, and then one for black. Each roll would give the pages a bunch of tiny little dots, and you can get a certain color that you were going for depending on how close the dots were to each other. It's just a trick of the eye. And in case you didn't know, Hulk was originally gray in his first issue as a nod to Frankenstein's monster, but it was very quickly scrapped. The 4-color dot process couldn't really do gray that well because it required the dots to be the exact same distance each and every time, and Hulk's color was dramatically different between each page and between each panel even. Green was just a much easier color to recreate. As the years went on and printing got better, we can now get every minor detail that the artist imagined and drawn out to the issue that I can now hold in my hands. New characters can break from the rules of the past, like Spider-Gwen being magenta, turquoise, white, and black. Although, for the well-established characters made during the era of 4-color dot printing, for better or worse, those rules are now etched in stone. Spider-Man did try to get a new suit in the 80s with Secret Wars, but fans weren't liking it too much, and he'd eventually go back to the red and blue. It's just not Spider-Man, you know? Of course, that ended up being way too easy to hand-wave away as it being an alien symbiote, and we got another cool anti-hero out of it, so you can always count on Marvel to turn any plot problem into a massive franchise. When most people say that the costumes just don't feel quite right, it's almost always because the color scheme is off. But there are certain times when the superhero always gets their costume feeling a lot more natural to the source material, and that's with the solo films. Narratively, it's become synonymous with the genre. The hero has their inciting incident, grows as a person, and learns the lessons they need to learn, then they can finally don on the actual superhero suit that their comic book counterpart wears to signify that they've become the hero that we all know and love. Captain America starts with a more basic version of his costume that is more reminiscent of the comics, but by the end of the film, his costume is much more in line with how the MCU was going to go for its more grounded and realistic take. But in between the two, he kept the colors and had that leather jacket and ammo bandoliers over it. It's iconic while staying practical. It had plenty of the elements that his suit had in Ultimates #1 while still being unique. But it's not just the wardrobe department that makes the suit look good on camera. It's the director, the lighting, the set design, and just overall color palette of the scene that helps the design of the suit flow thematically. When Steve Rogers is the scrawny little kid from Brooklyn, everything is entirely muted or neutral tones, except for the 3 colors that stick out, the red, white, and blue of Old Glory. As he finally enlists in the army, it's still muted, but the olive drab green fills the screen. It's not until we get to the 48-minute mark where we finally get any real scenes with color in them, and that's when Steve gets his first Captain America suit with the USO tours. And it's intentionally supposed to feel off. This first suit highlights the lack of detail in earlier iterations of comic book superhero suits, but also, notice how the blue in the background is much brighter than the colors on Captain America's suit. The USO dancers all match the environment around it, but it's just that one subtle difference that helps reinforce that Steve doesn't belong here. Now, contrast that with how much of a fish out of water Steve is in the sea of green when he finally sees all the soldiers in Europe. He learns that Bucky has been taken as a prisoner of war by Hydra, so he keeps his suit but wears a practical army helmet, motorcycle glasses, and that crisp leather jacket. Now we finally see him become Captain America. From here on out, the colors that dominate the screen for the rest of the film are red, white, and blue. The red of the explosion and the other soldiers' uniforms, the white of the snow and the sky, and the blue of the lighting that fills the rest of the screen, and of course the Tesseract. If you look at every other superhero solo film, the color palettes can also be tailored to follow that lead's primary colors. Doing this helps make the suit pop out, because now it and the actor are now the most important things on screen. Iron Man 1 was mostly reds and yellows, Moon Knight was black and white, and Black Panther was mostly black, silver, and purple. Although, you can only really do this within solo films. With team-up films, well, all of the colors of each suit and the Avengers still pop because the background is a muted gray. This was actually a technique pulled directly from the comic books, like we see with Secret Wars. With that many heroes on the page with clashing color schemes, the background was much more blank and dull, so you can help easily differentiate between everybody, but Black Widow and Hawkeye start to fade away just a little bit, because the focus is more on the 4 superheroes with powers. Natasha's red hair and the hints of Clint's purple help establish them as members of the team, but this problem becomes a lot bigger when more characters are on screen. Fast forward to Captain America Civil War, and the background is still a bland gray airport. Most of the heroes wear muted colors, except your eyes are still drawn to the 3 things that are the narrative focus of the fight: Iron Man's suit, Cap's shield, and the youngster who has no business in the fight, Spider-Man. By this point, Marvel has started to tone down everyone's suits, and to compensate, they added a lot more detail to the aesthetic of the character. But was it the right call? It was a call. Every hero was someone's favorite, so they're trying to give everyone something, but the director is probably trying to guide your attention to something else. Now scale all of this up to the final battle in Endgame. The lighting is a bit darker at times, unless you're in the foreground because of the random fires that are everywhere, but you can still make out everyone's distinctive colors in the background. And it still works for the most part. You can spot each hero when they're given their glory shot, but when it's not their turn, they usually fade into the background along with other Asgardians, Ravagers, Wakandans, and all the other nameless fighters that join the Avengers. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. For example, in this scene between Thor and Cap swapping hammers, if Mantis was as bright green as she is in the comics, you'd be more focused on her than this moment. Yet, the only things that are bright and colorful throughout the entire fight are the Infinity Stones, because those are the most important thing in the entire fight. There is a method to the madness, but it doesn't need to be this way. There are many other options out there to help keep the audience looking exactly where you want them to look at. Take Mad Max Fury Road, for example. It's also very colorful and eye-popping, but the action of the scene moves to the left and right of the frame, and with clever editing, there isn't a single cut that isn't motivated by the audience's focus. I say it like it's easy, like all you need is just Mad Max level of costume design, editing, cinematography, and directing, all categories the film either won Oscars for or at least nominated for, but even just steps in the right direction and an artistic eye can give us these bright and colorful costumes that we've been yearning for. But there's one more thing that we can see that Deadpool 3 is doing with Hugh Jackman's iconic Wolverine suit that I don't think anyone has talked about yet. It's still not exactly the iconic colors. The yellow is very vibrant, but the blue isn't. It's much easier on the eyes when only one of the colors is as bright, and the other isn't trying to clash with anything else in the scene. With all the rumors and leaks of other characters appearing, and also presumed to be in their traditional costumes as well, as long as the editing and cinematography are more focused on the bright yellow of Wolverine or the bright red of Deadpool, it won't be an eyesore. But yeah, what do you guys think? What's that one silly costume from the comic books that you just need to see on screen? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed today's video, please hit that like button and subscribe for more weekly content on comic books and nerd stuff. I've been Eric, and you've been awesome.